of Christ. So you're thinking about 606. And then around 605 is when Nebuchadnezzar started taking people from Israel into Babylon. And some of the people that he took there were very important people. Can you remember anybody who was part of that crew that was taken from Jerusalem to Babylon? Daniel. There you go. All the important characters who were taken back there. Now, they were taken away because God was judging Israel. And God was judging Israel for a particular amount of time. For how much time were they being judged? 70 years. 70 years because why? Right, they were supposed to not farm the land every 7th year to allow it to rebuild and to trust God and to live off of what grew naturally instead of harvesting, instead of planting the land. And they didn't do it, and because of that, the Lord took them out of the land for 70 years. And one of the things that's difficult is to understand exactly where the 70 years start and end. But for our purposes here, it's going to be easier to think in terms of 606, and you count 70 years forward to what date? What year? 536. It's 70 years from 30 to 100. So 36 to 606 is 70 years. And so that's an important date, an important time when it comes to understanding really what was going on with all that time. Now, I want to introduce you to a book that you may have seen before. It's called The Rose Book of Bible Charts, Maps, and Timelines. It's an incredible, real pretty color book. I'm going to be sharing some things with you about the Bible timeline. It's one of the things that I'm looking at. So it gives a timeline all the way through the Bible. And you can look at this later on if you want to. But it has one chart is the genealogy of Jesus. One chart, it shows the Noah's Ark, the way it could have been. And it's interesting that Ken Ham's Ark back in Kentucky looks like this. And I think he copied it from the Rose family who are putting these things together. But there's several different things. There's the names, Jesus and the names of God, Holy Spirit and the names of God, 100 proofs for the whole Bible, church history going back in the beginning of the time of Christ all the way through to today. And it just has tons and tons of things that are really interesting. It goes through a commentary on Psalm 23 and the shepherd imagery in the Old and the New Testament. And it just has lots and lots of really interesting things. And so I like it because I like to look at the ways that they are coming up with some understanding of how things come together all the way through the Bible. They've put thousands of hours into this unit here. Okay, so I'm talking about the year 536, but a couple of years before that, 2 years before 536 would be what? 538. Add 2 years to 6 and you got 538. And there was a man named Cyrus. And Cyrus was the king of Persia. And Cyrus's name is in the book of Isaiah, which was written hundreds of years before this. And the Lord told Isaiah to write this down, that his servant Cyrus was going to bring his people back from the Babylonian captivity. It's a fascinating thing to understand how precise the Old Testament is, how precise the prophecies are from the Old Testament, and how we can understand so much more of how precise the Bible is, what kind of faith we can have in the Bible. So in the year 538, Cyrus said, okay, now that Nebuchadnezzar has really messed up the Jewish people, I'm giving them an edict, the right to go back to Israel. And so Cyrus told the people that they could go back to Israel. And so they got all their stuff together, and a whole bunch of them, about 50,000 of them, decided to go back to Israel. Now, it's interesting. Do you have any idea of how many of them might have been taken out of Israel to go into the Babylonian captivity? Might have been a couple of million. And according to the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, only about 50,000 returned, which is kind of sad. The Lord told them, buy property, build houses, have families, get involved where you are, and I'll bring you back. But a small number of them actually decided to go back. And so they went back, and in order to fulfill the prophecies of Isaiah and Jeremiah and the promises that the Lord had given to Cyrus to bring them back into the land. So Cyrus tells them they can go back. They begin going back, and what did they start doing immediately upon getting back there in the year 536? They started rebuilding the temple, which was a really special thing for them to start rebuilding it. So they were rebuilding the temple and getting it all together, but then they were also building their own homes and getting involved back in the process of life back in Israel. And so they kind of got lazy and didn't do the temple. They didn't finish it at all. And because they were messing up that way, there was a prophet that arose in Israel at that time, and he's the one that said, do you understand why you're not having good success in your businesses? Do you understand why you're earning money to put it into a bag with holes? Do you understand why you're not being blessed? That prophet was Haggai. And Haggai said, the reason you're not being blessed is because you're not following through. You're building your beautiful paneled houses, and my house sits there all decrepit. You're not finishing it. And this was 14 years later that Haggai's bringing this prophecy to the people. And he's saying, you need to get with it. You need to get on it. And his prophecies and the prophecies of Zechariah were used to really get the people on the stick, to get them moving. And so the people decided, we've got to do it. Let's follow through. And so they actually were able to get the temple finished by the year 516, which was then 20 years after the year 536. So in 516, the temple's done. They're excited about it. Things are moving right along, and the people are being blessed. Besides Besides Haggai and Zechariah, there were two other leaders mentioned in these books, Zerubbabel and Jeshua. And they were the leaders, political leaders, and they were following the prophecies of Haggai and Zechariah. Okay, so they finished the temple around 516. Now, there's another thing that's happening at the same time. While they're still working, there are people in Persia who are doing other things. And there was a queen named Esther who happened on the scene, and she was alive around 478 when she became the queen of Persia. A number of years later, there was another prophet by the name of Malachi around 465 BC. And so all these things are kind of happening around the same time. And if we can kind of put it together in our own minds that we go back to the time of the Babylonian captivity in 606, and then discover that 70 years later, 536, Cyrus told them to go back to Israel, and then they started building the temple, and finally by 516 the temple was ready to be used. Now there were still problems going on with the people of Israel. They didn't quite get it all together. So there was a man named Ezra who was sent to Judah because they really didn't have their spiritual lives together. Ezra was a priest and a teacher, and he went back to help the people understand the Pentateuch, what it was they needed to be doing in the temple in order to be obeying the law of God. And so Ezra went back, and he was responsible for helping to teach the people and get them back into some kind of a spiritual life. There had been many who had intermarried with those that were not part of Israel, and one of his roles was to help them straighten all that out and to get themselves back together. Now, when Ezra was working there were still other problems. And that's where we come upon the book of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah's relative, it seems like a brother, had been in Israel, and he came back and reported what was going on in Israel. And Nehemiah was really unhappy. And you probably remember this from last week's lesson, that the report got back to Nehemiah. Nehemiah's really sad. Nehemiah wants to know what he can do about it. And he finally encounters the king because he's a part of the royal entourage. He was the cupbearer to the king. And so Nehemiah shared the king what was making him so sad. And so Nehemiah was given the right to gather a bunch of things to go back to Jerusalem to fix the problem. And do you remember what the problem was? The wall was broken down. The gates were broken down and burned. And he called that a reproach to the people because they weren't taking care of the city. And why would it matter? Why would they have to even care about the wall or the gates? For the protection. Because one of the things that they may have thought, why should we gather all these expensive things in the temple and make it all beautiful when people can just come and walk through the wall and come and take the things that they want? And so he was asking the king to help him to put together what he needed to get together. And so he asked the king for a lot of different things. Money, wood, and supplies to help build the wall. And so that was all the things that they were doing in helping to get together what needed to happen there with the wall that was broken down. Now the third chapter of Nehemiah is really an interesting chapter because there are a lot of things in there. And if you've been reading through the Bible and you come upon this chapter and you go, why am I reading this? What's in this chapter that I should care about other than a whole bunch of names that I can't pronounce? And that's what we come upon when we start the third chapter of Nehemiah. He's got it all together. Nehemiah was quite a leader. He was quite a challenger, and he said, we've got to put this together. Let's do what needs to be done in order to make our city safe. Now, I passed out this little sheet to you. It has a copy of the newer wall all around it, but the older wall is the one that Nehemiah seems to be referring to in all of this. And as we read through this chapter, I would like you to think in terms of how can we make a practical application for believers today. What is it that we can do in understanding the book of Nehemiah and chapter 3 of Nehemiah to have some clue about what we as believers might use this chapter for in helping us to understand what can be going on? So let's see, Dave, I'll tell you when to change the, well, is this thing going to work? Yeah, I'll let you move it when I tell you. All right, so Nehemiah chapter 3, just the first couple of verses. Then Eliashib the high priest rose up with his brethren the priests and built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and hung its doors. They built as far as the Tower of the 100 and consecrated it, then as far as the Tower of Hananel. Next to Eliashib, the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zakur, the son of Imri, built. Okay, so it's neat that it starts off with the high priest. This is the guy who was ahead of the priests. He was the high priest working in the temple, and obviously Nehemiah had done the job. He convinced the high priest to get on the job, and he got on the job with the other priests. It says his brethren, the priests, and probably because they're all part of the same family, but they built the sheep gate. Okay, now look at your little chart here. Where's the sheep gate? Top right, right in the corner. Any idea why it's called the sheep gate? For the sacrifices. Yeah. And so a lot of sheep came through that gate. Some people say this is the gate Jesus came through. Interesting thought. If you really want to have an interesting study of all these things, you can go to the Blue Letter Bible, look up the audio version of J. Vernon McGee on this chapter. And he's got a sermon on each named gate. And he goes through the whole thing about the sheep. And there's a lot of things you can study with the sheep. We are the sheep of his pasture, and the Lord is our shepherd. And he was the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. And so there are a lot of things that connect to it. And when you know the scripture more deeply, you can take some of these things and understand how they relate to what's going on with the Old Testament scriptures. Okay, so Eliashib the high priest rose up with his brethren, built the sheep gate. They consecrated it. Now, built the sheep gate. We're talking about a big gate. I mean, we're talking about a thing that's tall. You know, it's got to be tall in order to protect the city. It's tall and it's made out of big logs. You know, it's not like me putting together a gate for my backyard. You know, this is a big old gate that they're putting together that can be locked and used as protection against any army that was going to try to get in the city. So they built a big old gate, a heavy gate, and they did a lot of lifting. And this is like saying, okay, pastor, we want you to go build that church over there. And it's interesting that the high priest and his brethren built the sheep gate. They consecrated it. That meant that they blessed it and they dedicated it to the Lord. They hung its doors. And then they built as far as the Tower of the 100. You can see that at the top of your wall too. and then they went as far as the Tower of Hananel, which is part of the same section there of that wall. And the towers, why do you think they would want towers? Yeah, it was a watchtower. It was a place so they could see what's coming at them, and they could warn the people and tell them to close the gate and to protect themselves. Then next to Eliashib, the men of Jericho built. So remember, Jericho's just down the road. It's not real far away. And they might have actually had a desire to have a safe city so they could run into it in case they were being attacked. So the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zakur the son of Imri built. Let's go to verse 3. Also the sons of Hasenaa built the fish gate, and that's just across from the Tower of Hananel there. They laid its beams, hung its doors with its bolts and bars. Now, you remember how the bar slides into the gate to keep it from being opened. So it was an old-fashioned gate that then would have the bar that would slide shut for their protection. That was the sons of Hasenaa. And then verse 4, next to them, Memaramoth, the son of Urijah, probably Uriah. When you're thinking in terms of Hebrew, I think it'd be fun to have a Hebrew little Bible study for you all. Like Yahweh is spelled there with the J, and the J is the letter Yod, which is the one where Jesus said, not a jot or a tittle will pass from the word. Jot is the word for Yod. Yod is the letter that looks like a little apostrophe from which we get the letter J. And so Uriah, the son of Koz, made repairs. Next to them, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, the son of Mesheshabel, made repairs. Next to them, Zadok, the son of Baana, made repairs. Now, let's think in terms of repairs. When you're repairing a city wall, what are you doing? The rubble. Okay. You're getting it ready to put the wall up. Repairing the wall meant you were taking some big stones and you were setting them in place and stacking other stones on top of that. Think in terms of what it would be like for a bunch of priests to be stacking really big, heavy stones. What would it take? They had to have some kind of wisdom. I don't know if you've ever seen the ideas that people have of building the pyramids and how they had these giant stones and they were on rollers and they're rolling them up. And I'll bet you to build this wall in Jerusalem, they had to have a big ramp of dirt and they would take the big stones and roll them up on top.
Egypt had pulleys.
Well, yeah, you'd use the ropes and the pulleys. Yeah. I saw a really good YouTube video about how pulleys divide the workload. The more you have, the more the workload is divided. And so they're probably doing something like that in order to get these big old stones, and they were knocked over by Nebuchadnezzar. And so they're putting them back up, and the ones that were broken, they had to go find new ones in order to get them. And when it says made repairs, it's a big old deal. It's not like, okay, let's mix up a little bit of premix and slap some cement in a crack. They were putting big stones on top of big stones. And it's fascinating to see this, what they're doing here. Let's go to 5. Next to them, the Tekoites made repairs. But their nobles did not put their shoulders to the work of their Lord. So the people from Tekoa decided to come and work, but the nobles didn't really want to put any hand to it. Either they were lazy or they thought they were too important, and they didn't want to do that. So their nobles didn't do any work. Verse 6, moreover, Jehoiada, the son of Paseah, and Meshullam, the son of Besodeiah, repaired the old gate, and they laid its beams and hung its doors with its bolts and bars. And if you look down at the chart that I gave you, you go along that north edge again to the corner, and that's where the old gate is. And somebody said, aren't they all old gates? Why is this one called the old gate? Maybe it was older than the other ones. Maybe it was older than the other ones. Okay, and you keep reading the same thing. They laid its beams, hung its doors with its bolts and bars. Okay, verse 7. Next to them, Melatiah the Gibeonite. Anybody remember the Gibeonites? Weren't they the ones that lied to Moses or to Joshua? And they became part of Israel. And they were part of Israel to the point where they wanted to help rebuild the wall. Melatiah the Gibeonite, Jadon the Maranothite, the men of Gibeon and Mizpah repaired the residence of the governor of the region beyond the river. So there's no indication of who that was, whether they were talking about Nehemiah. He became the governor for about 10 or 12 years. Verse 8, next to him, Uzziel, the son of Harhiah, one of the goldsmiths, made repairs. Now wait a minute. We're not talking about stonesmiths here. We're talking about priests and we're talking about goldsmiths. The goldsmiths, we lost a camera back there. Was it an earthquake? I just think it's fascinating that you've got people here doing hard work, stone work, building gates, hanging gates, and putting this stuff all together, and they're not contractors. They're regular old people. And here's a guy that works in gold. And a goldsmith would be a person who might be working on a little earring like somebody needs here, or somebody might be working on a little plate that goes into the temple. He might be working on a design that goes into a house, or any kind of an intricate thing. And he's here lifting stones and doing things that are making repairs to the wall. Look at the next one. Next to him, Hananiah, one of the perfumers, made repairs. You go, what? You've got a guy who's, working in perfuming, and he's working on the wall, and he's doing what needs to be done as a part of the crew that's making repairs. And they fortified Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. And if you look on your chart, you can see the old gate, and then going south is the broad wall, which is really a longer wall. Now, somebody said the broad wall was really broad. It was like 30 feet broad. It was a big, wide chunk of wall, and you wonder, okay, if they were repairing that would take a lot of repair in order for them to be lifting all this stuff around and sliding it in place and putting it in a way where it would be a protection for the city. All right, let's go to verse 9. Next to them, Raphiah, the son of Hur. Now, does anybody know the Hebrew word for son? Ben? Ben-Hur. Did you notice that? It was Ben-Hur. Benjamin is the son of my right hand. It's interesting when you know just a few Hebrew words and you can kind of figure some things out here.
And it's interesting that Ben-Hur took place in Nehemiah, not in
Yes. But you know the word Ben was used from probably Abraham all the way through to today. Yeah.
And this wall, on the broad wall, would they also have residents in this wall as far as homes?
Could be. Yeah. It would make sense. And there are a lot of indications in the Bible where people lived in the wall, and the two spies were let down through the window in the wall. And so we know that there could be residences in big, wide walls like this, and it would be a safe home.
Well, when we get further into the chapter, it talks about people in front of their houses.
Right. Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would be
Right there. Okay, Ben-Hur, the leader of half the district of Jerusalem, made repairs. Next to them, Jediah, the son of Harumaph, made repairs in front of his house. Didn't have to go too far to find one. Next to him, Hattush, the son of Hashabniah, made repairs. So it's interesting how different people were placed all around the wall with different responsibilities. Let's go to verse 11. Malchiah, the son of Harim, and Hashub, the son of Pahath Moab, repaired another section, as well as the tower of the ovens. And you can see that a little farther down the broad wall. Next to him was Shallum, the son of Halohesh, leader of half the district of Jerusalem. This would be the other half. He and his, what? He and his daughters made repair. Wait a minute. I thought it was just the men that did the work. These ladies were willing to work. They were willing to do whatever needed to be done. And this man's daughters liked working with him. He and his daughters made repairs. And it's a fascinating thing to understand that they were not shut out from doing this kind of work. And it's interesting that we find indication that the Lord's watching. The Lord takes note of who's doing the work here. Let's go to verse 13. Hanun and the inhabitants of Zanoah repaired the valley gate. And we see where that is a little farther down. They built it, hung its doors and its bolts and bars, and repaired, what? 1,000 cubits of the wall as far as the refuse gate. They did a lot of work. They worked on 1,000 cubits of the wall as far as the refuse gate. Now in your chart, it's called the dung gate. And the refuse gate is where the trash was taken out. And where was the trash taken out of Jerusalem? Where was it taken? Yeah, to the Gehenna, the valley of the trash, or the valley of the smoke. It was where the trash kept burning, and Jesus used that as an example of hell, because it was a bunch of trash burning and a lot of worms, and it was just an ugly, stinky place. Verse 14, Malchiah, the son of Rechab. I want you to know that in the language of Hebrew, there is no ch sound. There's never a ch sound. CH is ch. It's like you have phlegm. Nebuchadnezzar. And
Do you know anything about that guy? Is he the same group that Jeremiah told him to come and drink beer or something, and he said no?
I don't remember.
For 100 years.
I don't remember what the name of that family was.
It was something similar.
One of these guys was one of the group that Ezra told to get rid of their foreign wives. It might have been the same guy. Anyway, Micaiah, the son of Rechab, leader of the district of Beth Hasarim. Beth is another word you need to know in Hebrew, right? Beth, house. Beth Lechem is the house of bread, Bethlehem. So I don't know what Hasarim is. Beth Hasarim repaired the refuse gate, he built it, hung its doors with its bolts and bars. Let's go on to 15. Shalun, the son of Kol Hoseh, leader of the district of Mizpah, repaired the fountain gate. He built it, covered it, hung its doors with its bolts and bars, repaired the wall of the pool of Shelah by the king's garden, as far as the stairs that go down from the city of David. And a lot of things there that I'm interested in, but I don't know, so don't ask me any questions about these stairs. After him, Nehemiah, the son of Asbuk, leader of half the district of Beth Sur, made repairs as far as the place in front of the tombs of David to the man-made pool, and as far as the house of the mighty. So they're continuing going on around. All right, let's keep on going because we don't have a lot of time left here. Verse 17. After him, the Levites under Rehum, the son of Bani, made repairs. Next to him, Hashabiah, leader of half the district of Keilah, made repairs for his district. After him, their brethren under Bavai, the son of Henadad, leader of the other half of the district of Keilah, made repairs. Let's go on to 19. Next to him, Ezer, the son of Jeshua, the leader of Mizpah, repaired another section in front of the ascent to the armory at the buttress. After him, Baruch, the son of Zabai, carefully repaired the other section from the buttress to the door of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. And then 21. After him, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Koz, repaired another section. Remember, he did one earlier. So he did another section from the door of the house of Eliashib to the end of the house of Eliashib. After him, the priests, the men of the plain, made repairs. And 23. After him, Benjamin and Hashub made repairs opposite their house. After them, Azariah, the son of Maaseiah, the son of Hananiah, made repairs by his house. After him, Benui, the son of Henadad, repaired another section from the house of Azariah to the buttress, even as far as the corner. Okay, and 25. Palal, the son of Uzai, made repairs opposite the buttress and on the tower which projects from the king's upper house that was by the court of the prison. After him, Pedaiah, the son of Parosh, made repairs. Moreover, the Nethanim who dwelt in Ophel made repairs as far as the place in front of the water gate toward the east and on the projecting tower. So we're finding other little places here in the chart that I gave to you. And we only have a few more verses to go here. So 27. After them, the Tekoites repaired another section next to the great projecting tower and as far as the wall of Ophel. Beyond the horse gate, the priests made repairs, each in front of his own house. And finally, after them, Zadok the son of Immer made repairs in front of his own house. After him, Shemaiah the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the east gate, made repairs. After him, Hananiah the son of Shelemiah, Hanan the sixth son of Zalaph, repaired another section. After him, Meshullam the son of Berechiah, made repairs in front of his dwelling. I'm losing my voice. After him, Malchiah, one of the goldsmiths, made repairs as far as the house of Nethanim and of the merchants in front of the Mikpad gate, as far as the upper room at the corner. Between the upper room at the corner as far as the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and merchants made repairs. Wow. I have my coffee.
So I see numerous ones of the people who had already done repairs earlier were contributing as the thing was progressing in various more additional spots.
They were really dedicated.
They certainly were.
And it's kind of a neat thing. And the thing I wanted to do was for us to have a little discussion in the 5 or 10 minutes we have left about where do we need repair done today? In the church, in the community, in the country. Where does there need to be repair done where you and I could have a part in doing something to help do the repairs? At least in outreach, at very least. There are people whose lives need to be repaired. They need to be brought to the Lord so that they can see His Spirit working in their lives and in their hearts. There are things that we could be doing by means of prayer that could really make a difference. We're part of a Zoom Bible study with about a dozen people, and the continual prayer request is for some kind of revival to take place in this country. And we need to keep praying that, not just once and done, but continuing to pray. And the Lord makes a big deal about being, consistent in prayer. Continuing to pray for some of these things that need to be prayed for. There are areas around the world where you and I could make a difference if we really would pray. And I find it necessary to keep praying for the church in Nigeria. Because in Nigeria, there are people who are suffering. There have been like 4,000 Christians killed in Nigeria this year. And you wonder, what could we be doing about that? We can't go over there with our Uzis and protect the church. But we know that the Holy Spirit can put an army of angels around them. And we need to be praying in that way. I learned about a church that had just been burned down. Several people had been killed, and the people of the church gathered together for an all-night prayer meeting to pray for the salvation of the people who had burned their church down. You go, that's not what I would be praying for. It's incredible what's going on.
We need to be praying though, as well as for those things, that we also
Yes,
like parents who are trying to keep their kids safe in school,
yeah,
terrorists.
yeah,
You know, we need to pray for our children in the schools that they'll be protected
yeah.
from the socialist teachers.
From the demons. Trying to reach their little hearts.
This reminded me of when they were building the tabernacle.
Oh,
Everybody worked.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And Moses said, "Tell the people to stop bringing so many offerings."
And I think that they're small chunks. Everybody had a job to do, but it was a small
Yeah,
area that they could do.
yeah,
They could focus on this one area.
right,
And do their best work.
yes.
And so prayer is not my strong point, but I think that I personally need to zero in on something
Mhm.
and then take that.
All right. Brother David Schindel, would you close us in prayer?
Heavenly Father, thank you for this Bible study tonight, Lord. And Lord, just thanks for reminding us once again, Lord, of the fact that your work requires work. Lord, help us to each be doing our part. Help us to be prayerfully seeking what you would have us to do, Lord. And Lord, thank you for seeing in this chapter the organization that the children of Israel had as they worked on their part. And Lord, and they finished their part and they secured their part. And Lord, help us to be thorough with whatever job you have us to do, Lord. Help us to complete it.